Let us pray. O God, our Father, whose will it is that your people live in ordered societies, inspire this nation with the spirit of peace, and so guide our leaders, especially those in this chamber who serve as representatives of your people. During the month of November, we turned on lights to celebrate our independent nation. Now you will see the Christmas lights to celebrate the nativity of Jesus Christ. Fill the people of this land with the delight that comes from light. May we walk no longer in darkness, but see you as the one pure light. As always, we pray that whatever is done will be done for your greater glory, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
This House is in session. Minutes for the meeting held on Wednesday, the 20th of October, 2021, and Tuesday, November 23rd, 2021, to be confirmed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the aforesaid minutes be confirmed.
Questions that the said minutes be confirmed. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting the ayes have it. The aforementioned minutes are hereby confirmed.
Announcements by Your Honour, the Speaker.
Letter from the Speaker of the Australian Capital Territory Legislative Assembly. His Honour Arthur Holder, MP, His Honour Senator Reginald Farley, Parliament of Barbados, Bridgetown, St. Michael, Barbados. There, Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, transition to a republic. I write to share with you both my very good wishes to you and your members on the occasion of Barbados' transition to a republic. Becoming a republic is a significant step in your country's post-colonial journey and an exciting constitutional development. It is heartening to know you will also remain an active part of the Commonwealth family of nations. With best wishes for this momentous new era in Barbadian history, yours sincerely, Joy Birch, MLA, Speaker, Legislative Assembly for the Australian Capital Territory, Acting CPA, Small Branches Chair, 2nd of December, 2021.
Messages from Her Excellency the President. Petitions, papers.
Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I am commanded to lay the annual report of the Barbados Port, Inc. for the year ended March 31st, 2020.
Government notices, private members' notices, notices of questions, reports from select committees, first readings of bills.
Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the first reading of the Fair Credit Reporting Bill 2021.
Questions that the aforementioned bill be read your first time. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting the ayes have it.
Statements by ministers, congratulatory and/or obituary speeches, personal explanations, motions for leave of absence, oral replies to questions, notices of motion for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, orders of the day.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of standing orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42, subsection 5, 43, and 44 for the remainder of the day's sitting.
The question is that the aforementioned standing orders be suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned standing orders are hereby suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting.
Government business, sir.
Government business is the order of the day.
Order number 11. In the name of the Honourable Minister of Energy, Small Business and Entrepreneurship, to move the passing of a resolution to approve the report of the Joint Select Committee laid in the House on the 23rd of November, 2021.
Honourable member for St. James Central.
Mr. Speaker, sir, as I begin, perhaps I should note the fact that, note and congratulate you, sir, on the fact that you are the holder of the enviable position of being the first honorable member of this House to ever serve as Speaker in the Republic. I have no doubt, sir, that you will continue to execute the task with the diligence and competence that you executed it prior. Mr. Speaker, sir, we've come to the point in the journey of this particular piece of legislation through the legislative process where we are about to consider the report of the Joint Select Committee of the House on the National Vending Bill 2021. You will recall, sir, that it was pursuant to a resolution of the Honourable House of Assembly on Tuesday, the 31st of August, 2021, and then with the concurrence subsequently of the Honourable the Senate on the 8th of September, 2021, that the Joint Select Committee was constituted. We would have had, as a terms of reference, sir, just for the benefit of all honourable members, first, the requirement that we inquire into and determine whether the bill as drafted fulfills the express objects of the promotion, the regulation, and decriminalization of vending in Barbados. Secondly, to examine and determine whether the bill as drafted will, upon effective implementation, fulfill the express objects of improving the environment for vending and contributing to the development of an ethos of transparency, compliance, accountability, and the general development of the sector. Thirdly, sir, we were charged with the responsibility to consider whether the bill as drafted offers an effective enforcement procedure to ensure compliance with its provisions. And fourth, sir, to make recommended changes if and where deemed necessary to the bill as drafted for further consideration by the Chief Parliamentary Council. And Mr. Speaker, sir, the House would have, well, the Joint Select Committee of the House would have met on 9 occasions subsequently. And I'm happy to say, sir, we unanimously agreed that the committee's business was to be streamed live via the Barbados Parliament's website. That enabled, sir, there being a widespread opportunity for our people to follow the proceedings of the deliberations and to get a feel, sir, for what the thinking of the members of the committee were. Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to acknowledge at the outset and to thank the Select Committee, its members, and the supporting staff for their unstinting efforts between the 24th of September, sir, and the 17th of November. In that very short space of time, sir, to be able to get us to have the turnaround of the business before us and be back here today. I also, sir, feel it would be impossible of me to speak the language of offering thanks without also reflecting on the very able and competent support given to us by the staff of the Chief Parliamentary Counsel's office, more specifically the Deputy Chief Parliamentary Counsel, sir, without whose generous devotion to time and duty, we would not be able to be here. I also feel, sir, that we benefited substantially from the input of a number of witnesses, some who came and contributed in person, some, sir, who wrote in and shared their submissions via writing, some persons, sir, who just shared perspectives on the way forward. But I want to acknowledge and to thank them all, and in many instances, those contributions, sir, helped to refine the perspectives of the committee. Certainly, as chair of the committee, sir, I must tell you, this process went through a number of iterations. And it is almost impossible to be party to a process that is drafting and redrafting, refining, and then re-refining, if that is a term, without beginning to feel a sense of kinship with the intellectual kinship with the subject matter. It is almost as if it is your own progeny. Mm-hmm. And the truth is, sir, that it is a humbling and a very constructive experience to sit and listen to third parties who are not as close to it share their own perspectives about it, and how that which you felt was near perfect could be better refined and brought closer to the ideal. There is no such thing as a perfect piece of legislation, sir, but I do believe that we have traveled a very long way, and I want to acknowledge and thank the contributors, also the media who gave this extensive coverage and ventilation, the stakeholders who came and gave their input, sir, much of which was invaluable to us, not only from a theoretical perspective, but a very man-on-the-street, day-by-day experiential perspective. Barvin, Barnufo, the Association of Wayside Vendors, sir, I think every member of the committee was enriched by experiencing and interacting with them during their contributions. And Mr. Speaker, sir, I am told that we may now have come to a point where, quite frankly, we have a model bill for the Commonwealth. Those people who have done not only drafting, but done some research into this sector have said to me that they feel that this really has gone where we've created something of a best practice. We've gone where previously understood to be model pieces of legislation have not yet been able to go. When I first would have come to this process, I would have been told, well, you have to look at the Indian legislation. The work done in California, Mr. Speaker, sir, was drawn to my attention. I think Bermuda as well. But we have been able to bring together, and I will expand on this during the course of my presentation, but we've been able to bring together the business done in Barbados in a plurality of theaters, whether it be vending on the beaches, vending, sir, in the fish markets, vending in the public markets, vending on the roadside. Sir, we bring it all together, and in a way that gives us not only the opportunity to straddle these theaters, but gives us a certain degree of equality of treatment across all of these theaters of work. I am led to believe, sir, that this is now going into the area where previously the Commonwealth has not been able to go. And I want to thank sincerely the members of the committee for their devotion to duty and enabling us to get to this point. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, it is obviously the first piece of legislation which comes before this House after Barbados has reached Republican status. And as the first act of a new republic, sir, it does a number of things. And obviously the next question is, well, what then are these things? First of all, sir, it takes steps to enhance this economic space that we call vending, which is occupied largely by working class people in this country. And that seems like a simple thing to posit, sir, but included in the understanding of the enhancement of this space, sir, is the issue of facilitation of business. We tend to speak in Barbados about facilitation of business in the context of the very deep-pocketed financier investor who is seeking to get his way through the bureaucratic system of the country quickly. His concerns very often, sir, the time taken at town planning, time taken to get licenses and permissions to do the things he wants to do. Mr. Speaker, sir, get connected to electricity, et cetera, corporate affairs and corporate registry and so on. That has been the language and the concerns which have been ventilated through the years, certainly through the last, I would say, I've now been on the precincts of this house, sir, for the last 19 years. And throughout all that time, that is how the business facilitation was defined. But, sir, we have come to a point where we are treating as legitimate business people those small micro players in the economy. Those people, sir, who are really the nuts and bolts of any economy, especially a developing one. The indispensable contributors, sir, are those people who on a day-by-day basis, through their legitimate economic pursuit, are able to keep employment going, keep food on the table, sir, keep or reduce the requirement for the state to have to intervene through its social services of welfare, etc., to enable to make sure that those persons do not fall into a poverty trap, a debt trap, and fall below the poverty line, Mr. Speaker. And we are facilitating those people by giving them a body of rights, a governance structure, Mr. Speaker, and a level of empowerment which is unprecedented in Barbados, and dare I say across this region. The second thing that we do, sir, is to honor, and for me this is exceptionally important, we are, through this piece of legislation, as now will be amended, we are honoring and sanctioning the commercial impulse of working class Barbadians, sir, who since the year 1688, under a most vicious slave code in this country, sought to denude and to deprive persons of a black skin from the opportunity, sir, to what the language of the 1688 slave code uses, to huckster and to truck for stolen goods. This is how vending was understood to be in 1688, that if you were selling something, you were trucking for stolen goods, and you were a threat, according to the language of the law then, a threat to the honest and industrious planters of this colony. Mr. Speaker, sir, that is the beginning of the psyche that we have heard so much about as we have transitioned to Republican status. And for the people who even up to last week were saying, why go the route of a republic? Those persons, sir, failed to grasp the necessity for us to emancipate ourselves from the mental slavery. Sir, the facts I outlined when I presented, I will not go back through in great detail again. But we cannot, sir, divorce where we are today from the developmental crucible that produced this system that we are trying to refine. And that developmental crucible, sir, is one in which the shedding of blood, the pain of our ancestors, physical and emotional pain, especially those who were trying, sir, to find a way, even in a system that defined them as subhuman, find a way to feed family, to feed self. And the history of the country reflects, sir, that on every plot of land, virtually all across the plantation system of Barbados, there would have been a little square footage made available for people to do a little farming on a Sunday, sir. The back-breaking work in the cane field for the massa, Monday to Friday, perhaps Saturday. But on Sunday, sir, they were able to do a little work for themselves. That little cultivation, sir, that piece, was therefore supposed to give you some food that would supplement the provisions that would have been made available. And being industrious people then, as we are industrious people now, resilient people then, as we are resilient people now, Mr. Speaker, sir, you didn't only bend your back to toil for the white man, but you bent your back to toil for self. And you practiced husbandry. And the records of the history of this country reflect, sir, that in every parish, in every village, there were to find, in every plantation, there was those people who through husbandry, sir, and responsibility, were able to put a little something aside, which they would trade. That impulse, sir, to be able to trade that extra that I have, to give to the honourable member for St. Michael's Southeast, that which she don't have, but in exchange for giving her what she don't have, I get, sir, something that she have that I need. That coexistence, sir, that need to treat to the material reality of our existence. The bartering. And they illegalized it from 1688, sir, in that slave code. And not satisfied, you will recall, sir, that I walked the House through multiple pieces of legislation passed in this Parliament designed simply to stifle the commercial impulse of working class, not working class, of black people, and the language of the legislation of this Parliament, discriminatory as it was, oppressive and repressive as it was, sir, speaks to legislation, piece after piece. Bill to prohibit the sale of goods to Negroes. Bill to prohibit the employment of Negroes in the business of selling and bartering. Bill, sir, to prohibit assembly of Negroes for the purposes of sale of commodities in Bridgetown. Bill, sir, in 1751, perhaps one of the most pernicious of all, to prohibit black hustlers from association with white merchants. And we ask ourselves, Mr. Speaker, sir, why you and I grew up in a Barbados, a post-colonial Barbados, a monarchical Barbados, sir, that in Bridgetown saw the very clear perpetuation of class discrimination. We grew up in a Bridgetown, sir, where at the bottom of Broad Street, you could not help but see the massive edifice that was the preserve of the persons in this country who commanded the heights of the economy. At the time that we were growing up, they would have been all white. And the building that down at the bottom of Broad Street, sir, I think they called it the Mutual Building. And at the top, could not escape the symbolism of Lord Nelson standing looking across at the Mutual Building. Nothing on Broad Street showed any sign of the existence of black people in commerce. And we ask ourselves why. Well, at that age, at 4, 5, 6, and 7, I didn't know. But Mr. Speaker, sir, the opportunity to read and learn, the educational opportunity, sir, that cultivates the curiosity of the mind, helps you to understand, Mr. Speaker, sir, that the embryo was shaped as far back as 1751, when the social and economic class distinction, that indelible imprint of prejudice on race and class in this country, sir, was created in this Parliament, sir, that created a piece of legislation designed to prohibit black hucksters from associating with white merchants. The us and them that created the Barbados. The repair job to the psyche goes on as recently as this week, a couple days ago. They asked why a republic, sir? The repair job to the psyche. And sir, 1774, the prohibition by law of itinerant vending. What is itinerant vending, sir? We can come to the definition of it in this legislation. But it has always been understood that itinerant is moving from place to place. The practice in the villages of Barbados, sir, going as far back as 1600s, was that people on a plantation who may have had some extra fruit, but were given a permission by their master to go to do an errand at the plantation next door, would carry the fruit with them that they grow, sir, and trade it at the plantation next door, trusted as they were by their master, they were allowed to move freely upon master's business, upon master's wife's business, Mr. Speaker, sir. And if you were sufficiently trusted, you were allowed to go into town and come back too. And therefore, sir, they moved around. And as they moved around, they traded. And as they traded, they bartering, sir, trying to make sure that the horrible existence of slavery was rendered a little bit akin to human existence for those people who in law were defined as not human, as chattel, as goods to be bought and sold at will. And Mr. Speaker, sir, those people would have been prohibited by law, by this Parliament in 1774, from pursuing that type of activity. Not satisfied, they came back again in 1811 with the act that still carries its shadow even today. The act to clear Swan Street of black people who are vending. And we ask ourselves again, why is it that we have to go the route of a republic? We have to go there, sir, because you are drawing the distinction at long last between a society and economy that was shaped in circumstances where black people not only could not go, but if they went at all with the business of legitimately trying to earn a living, sir, they were prescribed by law as being disallowed. And now we are saying, sir, that the descendants of those people, everyone, has a right in this country not only to aspire, but to achieve the highest possible office in this land of their birth. It is an indelible scar on the psyche of the people, and today, sir, we come to a point where we are completing that journey of rectifying the injustices. Mr. Speaker, so the third thing that this piece of legislation does is to empower the micro-business people in Barbados, as I said, with a form of facilitation, which must be directly addressed. It is guaranteeing for the first time in history, sir, that micro-business people in the vending space have a body of rights with respect to the business that they do. A body of rights, sir. I have said before when I introduced this bill that one of the challenges that fixate me about it, and you know, sir, let me just forget about my own thinking. When the deliberations of this subcommittee came to an end, within 2 minutes, sir, I got a first call. One was from a journalist who told me how much she enjoyed the opportunity to follow this. And she shared a view that she wished, as a young person, that more of the business of Parliament was conducted in this way, where people could hear the dissection, cutting down the piece of legislation to finite, minute pieces, to minute pieces, not finite, to minute pieces, and being able to understand the significance of the legislation to the man in the street, the people who trade with them, etc., on a day-by-day basis. For her, sir, that was an eye-opening experience, and she asked that I convey to this House that the usage of the committee stage, the Joint Select Committee stage, perhaps is something that we should consider doing more of, because it certainly enlightened. The second call I got was from a young man, not a journalist, but just a curious bystander, who says to me, Minister, I did not know. I am 25 years old. I am still studying at university. But I did not know that these things happened in recent memory in Barbados. He was moved, sir, by the testimony of the representative from Barvin, who spoke about his own father's experience at the hands of the Royal Barbados Police Force, as it then was. It was a force. Today, sir, it is a service. But in this Bridgetown and ours, sir, in this capital city of ours, sir, it was a matter of custom, not only in this century, but in recent memory. I have represented people, sir, you have represented people, sir, who have been physically removed from a location in Bridgetown, humbugged by the police. Sir, I am not going to treat the members of the police force as barbarians. I'm not going to suggest that in this speech. But I will say, sir, that there are too many stories that have not only been told, but have been experienced by Barbadians. And when a young man called me at 25 and said he did not know this thing happened, when he heard, sir, of the Temple Yard experience, I told him, but at that time, sir, son, I was a lot younger than you are now. And it shocked me that dogs would appear to run people, and the goods that they come with, scattered about and gone, pushed down, kicked away, destroyed. And when we talk about the body of rights, sir, what is the body of rights? That can no longer happen under this legislation, sir, because the state, not the crown, because we ain't talking about no more crown, the state of Barbados will be charged with a responsibility to compensate you for the damage done to your goods for the first time in the history of this country, Mr. Speaker. Finally, sir, we also speak to the decriminalization of the business of vending. And I have said to you, sir, that it has startled me. This is really the last vestige of the colonial structure. That in everything that we do, in every sphere of endeavor, you, Mr. Speaker, sir, are a practitioner of law. And you know that you are regulated not by criminal penalty first and foremost, but, sir, by civil structures, civic structures. You register in a civic structure as an attorney. You are regulated in a civic structure as an attorney. It is true of the doctors. It is true of the accountants. It is true, Mr. Speaker, sir, of the people who own a nursing home. It is true, Mr. Speaker, sir, of the people, if you want to have a security guard license, you go and you register for it 31st of January next year. People in all walks of life will be going and registering for their permit to do what it is that they do. But the vendor, Mr. Speaker, sir, he was treated to, prior to now, by criminal penalty in the courts of Barbados. Consequentially, upon running into and colliding with the criminal law, Mr. Speaker, sir, what are the knock-on effects? What is the mischief that we cure? We cure, sir, the mischief of a man being told because he and a policeman had a difference of opinion that he will no longer be able to get a certificate of character. That he, sir, can't go to the embassy like how you could go and apply for a visa. That he, Mr. Speaker, sir, is to be compromised for God knows how long for the rest of his life because of a criminal conviction. And that's what we have done. So we've done to generation after generation of Barbadians, sir. And that is what we come through this piece of legislation to cure. The decriminalization of the business of vending and removing forever the scourge of criminal penalties, sir, applied to the legitimate commercial impulse of black working class Barbadians. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, I had promised my colleagues that I would not be as long on this occasion as I was on the last. So I will try to honor that. Sir, this vending bill has benefited from substantial work at many levels. Foundation, sir, is always the basis and groundwork of anything that we do. I became a cabinet minister in this administration when we collectively determined that we would go this road in 2018. I, however, became minister responsible last year in July. So between 2018 and then, sir, obviously some foundation work had to be done, some conceptual heavy lifting had to be done, Mr. Speaker, sir. And the person who had the ministry responsibility, leadership responsibility at the time was the Honourable Member for St. George South, and I want to thank him for the work he has done in shaping the mold to bring us to this point. Mr. Speaker, sir, the bill seeks to regulate, as I said, vending activities across all of the theatres. And so that I am clear, sir, for ease of understanding, the Ministry of Agriculture has markets and slaughterhouses under its jurisdiction. The Ministry of Agriculture, sir, will preside over the wayside vending and the roadside vending, sir. All public markets in Barbados are not fisheries markets. And therefore, sir, I'm indebted to the Minister of Agriculture for his input and robust support. Equally, sir, the Ministry of Maritime Affairs and Blue Economy has to have its jurisdiction over the fish markets. And the fish markets, sir, and the fish landing sites are places where obviously vending takes place. And I'm equally indebted to the Minister responsible for Maritime Affairs and Blue Economy for his support in this regard. Mr. Speaker, sir, the same has to be said of the Minister responsible for the environment, with his responsibility, and perhaps even more complex, because the National Conservation Commission under the law of Barbados has its own independent regime with respect to the management and administration of the beaches of this country. And Mr. Speaker, sir, vending is done on the beaches, it is done on the esplanades, it is done in the gardens, it is done in the public parks. And I, sir, am equally indebted to the Minister responsible for the environment. And sir, equally the Minister responsible for transport, because again, sir, we cannot seriously talk about the vending zones without also looking at what happened on our highways. And the impact of this pandemic on our people has caused more and more to try to find forms of independent employment. And we see it on the highway every day, a new face emerges, sir. People trying to legitimately earn their way. And we have to facilitate this by the building out of the vending zones. I am grateful, sir, to the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry who has walked with me. They not only come here and give evidence, Mr. Speaker, sir, but then walked with me along the highway to visit sites so that we can then, and give advice, because he's a town planning specialist, give advice, sir, on how we can make sure that we can better facilitate persons along that highway with regard to building out the vending zones that we want. And the task, therefore, sir, from day one until now, the task, sir, ably carried by the Honourable Member for St. George South, right through until this point, Mr. Speaker, sir, has been to harmonize, sir, and equalize the treatment of vendors across all of these theatres of vending activity in Barbados. To bring them all together, these disparate approaches. What happened in the fish market, sir, never had any relationship to what happened on the beaches. Different considerations applied. And what happened on the beaches and the fish market, sir, was completely different to how you treat the people in the public market or in the road. And Mr. Speaker, sir, we have had, therefore, to forge a new way forward where we have a standardized approach to the business of vending across the island. And I say, frankly, it could not have been done without the immeasurable assistance of colleagues in the cabinet to whom I am indebted. And Mr. Speaker, sir, I feel that it is very vitally important that we spend some time also on reflecting not only on the very sincere and serious reform-minded persons who comprise the cabinet, but sir, I want to say that I'm equally indebted to the Leader of the Opposition. The Leader of the Opposition, sir, would have participated in every meeting of this committee, every one. And, sir, would have demonstrated the capacity of this House to elevate itself beyond partisan rancor. We, sir, would have had the benefit not only of his contribution, but very helpful and very well considered, thoughtful, constructive input. And I want to say, sir, that all the members of the committee, if I could speak on behalf of them, are indebted, sir, to the role played by the Leader of the Opposition in trying to make sure that this was as complete and as fair an endeavor as it could possibly be, and equally, sir, as speedy an endeavor as it was. Because I do believe, sir, that there have been a number of comments about the speed with which we were able to turn this matter around. Now, sir, a number of amendments arose from the meetings of the Joint Select Committee. I want to walk the House through some that I consider to be the most important. At Clause 2 of the bill, sir, we have introduced a definition of the term itinerant vendor. And this is important, Mr. Speaker, sir, because a regime has been created at Clause 12 to govern and to facilitate itinerant vending. Now, sir, itinerant vending and this legislation means the offering for sale of merchandise or the rendering of services from a vehicle parked in a vending zone or being driven from one customer's premises to another, or offering for sale of merchandise or rendering of services in a vending zone or other site for a period of less than 12 hours. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, the term vehicle is explained in the Road Traffic Act, Chapter 295, Section 2 of the Laws of Barbados, and it is applicable in this particular piece of legislation. It includes, sir, vehicle that is, includes a carriage, a wagon, a cart, a motor vehicle, a bicycle, a tricycle, a van, a handcart, a sledge, a truck, a wheelbarrow, a wheelchair, any other machine for carriage of goods or persons on land. It also includes every conveyance capable of being propelled or drawn on wheels or tracks by any means. And where the context permits, sir, it also includes an animal being drawn or ridden. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, why is this important? It is important because, as I said to you, it was impossible for the committee not to recognize and to create a regime around and to preserve the cultural practice in Barbados of itinerant vending. And in its original form, this bill, sir, would have spoken to a variety of types of vending. As I pointed to you, sir, several theaters of vending. But as close to perfect as we thought we had gotten, sir, we had not done adequate justice to those people who may be here today at 11:15, but in Oysters this evening at 7 o'clock. We'll be down in town Saturday morning, Mr. Speaker, sir, at 7:30, but back up in Oysters at 7 o'clock Saturday night. Those people who are moving around, not fixed in any one location, but through the industry, similar to the industry practiced by their ancestors and forebears, sir, are what we would call on the streets, sir, hustling to make a dollar. And the fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, sir, now at Clause 12, there is a provision, a full clause outlining how the itinerant vendor will secure a specific license for itinerant vending. Mr. Speaker, sir, how it will coexist with those people who are occasional vendors. And for the avoidance of doubt, let me say that coexistence allows persons who are itinerant vendors to operate for a period of 12 hours or less at fairs, festivals, carnivals, cultural, entrepreneurial events, recreational events, Mr. Speaker, so that you have a choice. You may be an itinerant vendor who is at a sporting event, and equally, sir, you may be a person who does a one-off thing. You have some money to make at this sporting event. You've got some things that you could sell, and you get an occasional license to be at the sporting event. So that we have ensured, sir, that there can be a coexistence in the interest of including all, and in the interest, sir, of broadening or widening the net to capture all of that part of what I keep calling the commercial impulse of working class Barbadians, sir, who would, under ordinary circumstances, going forward, be able now to capitalize on this opportunity to earn a living through vending. Obviously, for the purposes of the itinerant vendor, the conditions that apply are very similar to those that apply to other vendors, especially with respect to the sale of food, and therefore the certificate of good health issued by a registered medical practitioner, which applies in all the other circumstances, would apply to the itinerant vendor, and equally the license to carry on a food business granted pursuant to the health services food hygiene regulations would apply to the itinerant vendor as they would, sir, to any other vendor who is selling healthy food or selling food. I should also say, sir, that we intend that the regulations which will follow on this act, because remember, on the passage of this act, there must be a period of time during which now we have the regulatory framework transform into a lived reality. There are at present no vending zones in Barbados. I have said clearly that the vending zones must be places that people can come to and work in, and you can get some running water. That you must have a bathroom facility where you can relieve yourself. Mr. Speaker, so I don't feel good that in 2021 I have to be making this case. And it is something that we have done to our people, to ourselves. It is a contemptuous way that we have treated to each other. Sir, and it is not only that you look down the nose at the vendor and say that he, for some strange reason, his biochemistry is different because he's into the physical requirements of the vendor are fundamentally different to the physical requirements of the Speaker of the House of Barbados, who from time to time leaves his throne and goes to the gentleman's facilities in order to disburden himself, Mr. Speaker, sir. But for a vendor, this is a working environment in which we feel happy driving past people all day Sunday morning from 6:30 a.m. sometimes until 4:30 in the afternoon, sir, and you can't see one facility there for the gentlemen to use, for the ladies to use, Mr. Speaker, sir. No running water available, sir. We want to talk about building out commerce in the country, but there are no facilities for people to do their business later into the evenings because there's no lighting made available. We want people to sit down and enjoy a kind of family experience around the fruits and the coconuts and things, because there are some children, sir, who genuinely, were part, and believe you me, sir, in upper middle class Barbados, in some parts of this island, and I represent the Platinum Coast, so-called, it comes as a shock to some little people, little children, where the byproduct comes from. They go in the supermarket and they see the milk, but they're accustomed to seeing the cow get milk. You see the coconut water there, but you ain't seen the body cutting the coconut in your life yet. And let us be very real. Let us be very practical about it. It is a reality, sir. And we have to make sure that we anchor our young people. And this is one of the things that made those activities that used to be able to be done in Queen's Park before COVID, AgroFest and so on, so important, because it kept our young people connected to certain basic realities, And Mr. Speaker, I genuinely feel that we must be at a point now where you have a few benches and so on where young people can be in a vending zone and watch what's happening. and recreate themselves with the family a little bit too, you know. And if for those people who only see things through that blinkered age-old vision of the tourism dollar, yes, for them too, that the tour bus could come in and park and the tourists can get out, and because they're equally curious, Mr. Speaker, sir, equally curious. But, sir, and you can go on and on. The Honourable Member for St. Michael South knows how passionate I have felt about the fact that the fish markets should be a place, sir, that not just a vending zone, but a place of the cuisine, the culinary delights of Barbados being sampled. It will be for the member for St. James Central, Kerry Simmons, a blessed day when people of all walks of life, sir, can have lunch on a Friday afternoon in a fish market in Barbados. And pick the menu of fish that you want. Watch it get cooked. Sir, think of the impact that has on the tourism product. But by extension, Mr. Speaker, sir, think of what it means to the tourists to sit down and watch the fish being boned, to watch fish get scaled. But anyway, in New York City, you're going to see it, Mr. Speaker, sir. There's nowhere in Chicago, Illinois, that you're going to see it, sir. You're not going to see it when you come from Scotland and so on. It is an object, sir, of interest. But we have this Victorian concept of working class people and that which they do as being inherently inferior, so that we have become slaves to that psyche. And therefore, sir, we have chosen to steer visitors to this island away from that which is the bedrock of the island. The bedrock of the existence of vast numbers of the people of the island, sir, is something that we feel that you've got to hide because you're ashamed about. When rather than that, sir, you should be lauding it and celebrating it to the world. Because I am very sure, sir, that when it comes to boning a flying fish, I will find nobody in the world who can do it better, faster than a Barbadian. Well, Mr. Speaker, sir, the fact of the matter is that this particular clause on itinerant vending is pregnant with potential, because it is also very significant for the business of the Ministry of Education. And part of what the regulation structure must also do is to flesh out now the facility for the Ministry of Education to be able to identify those schools which will, and I presume it might be all schools, who will have vendors, and where those vendors are inside the school, provide for the quality of food, healthy food, or taking our young people to that next stage. And if you're on the outside of the school, but within a certain area of the school, you're entitled to vend, of course. You're entitled to be itinerant vend, of course. But because of the impact you may have on the school children, then you're going to have to vend in accordance with certain conditions, and the quality of that which you sell must be in accordance with the health objectives set by the Ministry of Education for the protection of our young people. This is those standards. So that, Mr. Speaker, sir, as I said to you, I think that this is a developmental chapter that we enter into as we embark on this Republican journey. I also say, sir, that the activities that are not to be construed as vended for the purposes of this act are equally important, and the committee spent some time on that. Now, the legislation, sir, the legislation, Mr. Speaker, sir, we're just trying to get my bearings through this act. The legislation at clause, sir, 3E. We are talking 3.2E, actually. We're talking about the activities that are not construed as vending for the purposes of this act. And the committee, sir, was guided by some interesting submissions on this matter. We obviously are looking at certain things which you do as a matter of course, which are not vending. For example, sale of food or drink in a bakery, in a canteen, a hospital, Mr. Speaker, sir, a club, institution, etc., etc. But, Mr. Speaker, sir, what we also had to recognize that we had unwittingly left out was another cultural reality. It was a glaring lacuna drawn to our attention by some of the actual practitioners of vending. And that is the benefit of having people like Barvin and the Wayside Vendors Association, sir, come and give evidence. Because, Mr. Speaker, sir, what we do in Barbados is to sell goods or provide services from in your house, your house, in your yard, within, according to the language of the law, sir, within the curtilage of your residence. Well, Mr. Speaker, sir, the reality, therefore, is how could you treat to that? Well, everybody house can be a vending zone. And so, therefore, what we have opted to do, sir, is to take that out of the Act. And therefore, for those purposes of people who, and you have some in your constituency, I have seen. I have some in mine. There's one that strikes me, sir, as you journey through the parish of St. John on the way to Bathsheba, sir. If you're going through Bath, as you go through Bath, there is a lady who has set up on the very front of her lawn and has a little umbrella. And when the vehicles pass by, the tour buses and so on, so I've seen them actually stop. When the tour buses used to be able to take that road easily, because the road, I know the Honourable Member is well aware that that road is in dire need of some repair, but he's the Honourable Member not only for St. John, but he's a minister in the relevant ministry, so I know that is getting the necessary attention. But sir, the beauty of it was for to see the big tour bus pull up, sir, and the folks disembarking in order to do a little business with this lady who is just sitting outside her house under a little umbrella, selling those things that she sells. And sir, so that type of operation we have chosen not to humbug and overly formalize, but if you're selling within the curtilage of your residence, sir, then you do that, continue to do that without necessarily having to come to be licensed. And that allows, therefore, for the cultural reality of the practice of vending, sir, at your house or in front of your house to take place. And because it is structured in such a way as not only to capture sale, but to capture services, the supply of services, we therefore felt that you cannot now require every young lady who is going to do some hair braiding in the gallery to get $1 to be humbugged by having to come and apply for permission to be in a vending zone and so on. It is a practical reality, sir. That is, I see it in every village of my constituency. Some young ladies with the most nimble fingers you can find doing their hair braiding and so on an evening after work or on a Saturday when you pass through to visit your constituents, as I hope, sir, you are doing from time to time. And so that is something that we left. The other thing that I think the committee benefited from was the contribution from the representatives of Barnufo, the National Union of Fisherfolk Organizations, sir, on the question of the sale of fish to vendors by fishermen. Now, again, it is not the intention of is not the policy of the administration to oppress people who are in other vocations, not vending, but they're in other vocations. But you oppress them unintentionally by requiring them to ascribe to the same responsibility of vendors, even though they are themselves not in the business of vending. An example of that is what happens in the fish market. I land my boat, sir, as a fisherman. I am not going to sell the fish myself. I am going to sell those fish to a vendor who will in turn sell. So I take the fish off the boat, and the Honourable Member for St. George North is the vendor to whom I am going to entrust the sale. But I should not have to get a vending license in order for that transaction to take place. And so therefore, so we have carved that out, again, benefiting from the very precise and clear, not theoretical now, but practical input from from Barnufo, sir, on that particular matter. For that reason, sir, Clause 32F of the legislation was created. Where a fisherman sells fish to a vendor, it is not to be construed as vending for the purposes of this act. So what we have done, therefore, sir, is to carve out certain practices in Barbados which are cultural realities that we do not want to force out of existence, cultural realities that we want to continue to support and to encourage, sir, and which really would only be exceptionally onerous if we sought to overly formalize them. The question, sir, of licensing and permit requirements. And in this regard, the committee was directed to the fact that there is a very interesting challenge we have with the Minors Act of Barbados. The Minors Act of Barbados creates, sir, a legal incapacity on the part of persons under 18 years of age with respect to their ability to contract commercially. Now, sir, minors are therefore presumed to be legally unable to enter into contract. The business of vending is contractual commercially. How then can you treat to this matter? The reality is, and it's a very practical, lived reality in every working class community of Barbados, sir, children in Barbados are, in fact, out of school at age 16 or age 17. And if they are not in the happy position to have the number of O-levels that allows them to easily find employment, sir, then we have as a parliament and as a government to ensure that we do not create a structure which allows for those 17-year-olds, 16 and a half, etc., to be preyed upon by people who would mislead and manipulate them for ill purposes. And so therefore, as I said to you before, I am indebted to the kind of reform-minded people who sat on this committee. And we belabored this matter for some time. And Clause 4 has therefore been redrafted to facilitate those persons between age 16 and age 18 with the ability to legally vend. And this will be done under a special dispensation, again, to be created under the regulations pursuant to this act. And that dispensation, sir, will be akin to an apprenticeship. So that even though you cannot commercially contract, sir, you can work with an established vendor who is licensed. And he is the person or she is the person. And again, Mr. Speaker, sir, you're working alongside this person. That person might be your mother. And you are able to get your experience in the business even though you can't do the transaction yourself. We do it in law, sir. We call it pupillage. Yeah? A youngster come out of school. He is completely green coming from law school. Could not be entrusted to do anybody's conveyance on his own. He is not even called to the bar 6 months good yet. In fact, in some cases, sir, not called to the bar at all. Because you come out of school, sir, and you still got a little period of time before you get called. But the reality is you work with senior counsel. And you do those things that senior counsel guiding you to do. And if it can be done for those at the lofty heights of the profession, sir, why can it not be done for those people who are not so well off and so fortunate? That was the question put in the committee, and one has, sir, I think, to yield and bend under the considerable weight of the influence of that argument. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, sir, we have taken that position that sir, that there will be that special dispensation akin to apprenticeship, which will allow us to be able to incorporate young people in the business of vending without troubling the Minors Act, but at the same time facilitating those people who are between 16 and 18, who ordinarily would not be able to contract, but they can work in partnership with and in conjunction with vendors who are established and licensed appropriately so that they can be exposed. And again, Mr. Speaker, sir, I feel a sense of indebtedness to the representative, that lady who came from the Wayside Vendors Association, Juliet. Yes, she was a Moor. I remember that. I did not ask the speaker's leave to call her name. But she made an indelible impression. And, sir, she spoke about her own youngsters. And sir, the takeaway there was a plaintive cry, if you will, for this Parliament to take this thing as seriously as possible. That we are not just treating to a theory, we are treating to a lived reality for thousands of people in Barbados. And that what she wanted was to know that her youngsters would be able to do this too, and to do it in a way that was fair to them and fair to their development. And sir, that you know, we create these legal hindrances, these obstacles. This country is good at finding a reason why something cannot be done. It is not so good, unfortunately, at finding the way to get it done. And the problem that we were pointed to, sir, is that the Minors Act would not allow this to happen. I remember the Honourable Member for Christchurch, West Central, reminding us, sir, that he began his political journey as the Minister responsible for youth affairs and would not know how to reflect on a Barbados that even as we were doing this, was still trying to maintain an impediment created under the Minors Act. That may be well-intentioned. That's why we are not recommending, or we're not doing anything to have a consequential amendment to the Minors Act, because we can understand why you would need to protect young people whose judgment may not be as mature as senior, experienced people in the community from getting into commercial relationships that might disadvantage them. But at the same time, sir, you can't allow that act to be the instrument that becomes a means of disempowering those young people, many of whom, because of circumstances beyond their control, have collided with the formal structures of the education system and found themselves outside of it at age 16. And sir, I don't have to tell you that tale. You know it. You know it all too well. Come from a broken home, born into the depths of poverty in Barbados. In some instances, only knew one parent. That parent may have 4 or 5 other children. That parent, sir, may not have, and in most cases of this nature, sir, does not have a very good job or an easy job. That parent may have to work both day and night, can't pay attention to homework, certainly can't tell this child that they're going to private lessons. That child can't be going to private lessons. There's so many blessed and more fortunate, more privileged Barbadians when it comes to this thing called 11+, that you go to private lessons in maths, and you go to private lessons in English, and you do everything, because it's like a production line to get through this 11+ examination. And Mr. Speaker, so that's how this country has gone along. And ask them themselves why you leave behind so many who are less privileged. Well, you can't be asking that question. You did it because you consciously have put these structures in place. It is now the challenge again of this administration, yet again, under the leadership in this particular regard of the minister responsible for education, now to try to find ways of unraveling that particular problem. But where does it take us? It takes us to a point, sir, where sometimes you have gone into that 11+ exam with not only the absence of requisite parental assistance, the absence of the ability to have the fallback safety net, but circumstances, sir, where that child may also be afflicted with a learning disability that has not been properly picked up or treated to. But they got to do the same 11+ exam. Something as simple as an attention deficit disorder. But who's making time? Who's pausing the process to deal with this particular case appropriately? We have seen too many instances of that in Barbados, sir, where our young people therefore have fallen between crevices, some to be forgotten forever. And then when that becomes a problem in class 2, or form, which one is that? Secondary school, class 2, form 2, whichever one it's called, form 2. When it becomes a problem at age 14.
Not form 2, class 2.
Class 2. And then you're told, well, the report come home, well, John ain't performing well, you got to stop down. Okay, so he stopped down. And then he stopped down in class 2 again. And by class 3, people who were informing him at class 1 are in long pants and going along. And then they say to him at age 16, boy, look, you ain't making it, you got to left school, yeah. What happens to him? And as we're talking this thing, sir, let us be very frank, because, you know, I can't do it in theory. I got to do it in practice, because this society is a society that has been born, it's been forged, I say it all the time, a crucible, sir, of discrimination and inequality. I went to a school, you know, I'm a member, for St. Peter would know who I speak of, I will not call his name, but he's of a different hue than he and I. Hue, H-U-E, as in color. And Mr. Speaker, sir, when that particular young man was expurgated, I think that is the word that is used. Expelled. Yes. Expurgated, expelled. At 16. Because of who he was and what his family owned, the next day, the next working day, he was dressed in a tie and a long sleeve shirt and a pair of pants, trousers, and sir, he was a floor manager. If that happened to somebody who come out of Redmond Village, if it happened to somebody who come out of Fitz Village, if it happened to somebody who come out of Hoyts Village, St. James, sir, the next day they are not going to be anybody's manager nowhere. The next year they're not likely to be anybody's manager anywhere. The rest of their life may pass and there'll be nobody's manager anywhere. It works for some. It don't work for everybody. Again, the business of this administration is not just to send the psyche, but to do the things that right-size this ship and create the equality of opportunity that must be there in this country. And that is the mission that we are on, sir. So, Mr. Speaker, I say all that to say that we have redrafted the Clause 4 in order to facilitate persons between age 16 and 18 with the ability to legally vend. And that will be done under a special dispensation, which is akin to apprenticeship. And the regulation, sir, will attend upon the passage of this act. Now, sir, I had said before that I was indebted to the leader of the opposition. And he would have drawn to our attention, sir, a challenge that existed at Clause 17. Now, for the benefit of the House, sir, I'll just go through Clause 17, because it falls under Part 5 of the bill, and it relates directly to the question of rights and obligations of vendors. It says, sir, at 17.1, that a vendor has the right to carry on the business of vending, A, in accordance with the terms and conditions of the license granted under this Act, and B, subject to the provisions of this Act or statutory instruments made thereunder, or any relevant enactment pertaining to vendors, without fear of harassment or unreasonable impediment. So we are writing into law that the right of the vendor is a right to carry on the business of vending without fear of impediment or fear of harassment or unreasonable impediment. subject, of course, sir, to the provisions of the relevant laws that might apply, including regulations in this act, which give vendors not just a body of rights, but also impose on vendors some obligations as well. It goes on to say, sir, that a vendor who is operating pursuant to the legislation is entitled to 30 days of notice before the imposition of an eviction notice that is issued against him. So that if I am going to move you for whatever reason from the place where you're vending, this legislation will no longer allow it to be done in a manner such as that which I will outline to you. That I show up one morning with my vehicle packed with my produce. I offload my vehicle on the outskirts of the capital city of Bridgetown, and I place my produce in the place where I am accustomed doing my business on a daily basis. My vehicle is then taken and parked, as I do on a daily basis, because I cannot park my vehicle right next to where I do my vending. But then, Mr. Speaker, sir, lo and behold, officers of, at that time, the Crown, calling themselves the Constabulary of the Royal Barbados Police Force, which it then was, show up and say to me, "Skipper, you gotta move." Whereupon I logically and legitimately asked, well, how you could tell me I gotta move? Where am I to move to? My mind tell you gotta move. And you gotta move now. That's how it worked, Mr. Speaker. And if there was a questioning of that imperative type of approach, that questioning, sir, was usually met with very severe consequences. Now, sir, we say that can't work, and therefore, the introduction of a period of 30 days notice before this type of eviction takes place is built into the legislation in order to ensure that the right of the entrepreneur is protected. In the same way, Mr. Speaker, sir, that the person who is renting a space in a store in Broad Street in the same capital city will not be able to be moved from that store without given notice under the lease, usually 30 days. In the same way, Mr. Speaker, sir, that you, if you are renting a space for the practice of your profession, will not be able to be arbitrarily removed without a period of notice. We say, sir, that there must be equality of treatment in law to this class of businessman too. And therefore, the period of 30 days is written in, so that gone forever is this arbitrary and discretionary approach, where one morning, out of a clear blue sky, you come and you terminate everything, dislocate the individual, because the micro businessman in a body, he has no rights, there are no obligations on this part of the state towards him, and therefore, sir, in circumstances he must move. Those things that he has can be damaged, they could be destroyed, they could be lost. Nobody cares, nobody has taken any sort of an inventory of what has been damaged, destroyed, or lost, or collection of all three. Mr. Speaker, sir, the reality is he gonna move, full stop. Cannot continue to work. The Leader of the Opposition raised the matter that, as it follows next, the entitlement on the part of the vendor is that he must be consulted in respect of any assignment to a new site or location in relation to the carrying out of the vending business. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, as I said to you, it is quite possible, and I confess it happened to me, that you go over something so often that you begin to feel a sense of kinship with it. And when I presented this bill, I genuinely felt that the issue of consultation had been satisfactorily outlined, because you're saying, well, I have a right to be consulted. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition quite rightly made the point that under the Constitution of Barbados, he is entitled to be consulted on decisions that may be made by the government. But when he is consulted, it need not be anything more than, Joe, I am planning to do this. Is that enough? Now, in law, it is argued that it is enough. But are we content? This was I'm taking time for those who did not follow the deliberations of the committee. I'm taking time deliberately now for you to understand some of the things we wrestled with. Is it enough to simply say, Mr. X, you are a vendor, we intend to move you to a new site or location so that you can carry out your business there? The answer, I think, has to be, well, that certainly cannot be enough. We have to go further. Because consultation should mean an engagement in which I have the right to share my views, and that my views are heard, and not only heard, but there's an engagement in which they are acted upon, and a reasonable type of evidence of an exchange on this matter should be in existence. After much reflection, we found a form of language at subsection 4 of the clause. So it is clause 17.4, which says, for the purposes of subsection 3b, consulted shall entail that the manager of the vending zone shall, within the 30-day notice period, write to the vendor stating the reasons for the assignment of the new site or location of his vending business, and the vendor shall respond to the manager of vending zones in writing within the 30-day notice period, stating, where necessary, his objections to the assignment to the day, to the notice period. The reasons by the vending zones manager referred to in subsection 4 shall take into account discussions on the subject of relocation with the vendor and with organizations that represent the interests of vendors generally and organizations that represent the interests of the vendor who is the subject of the relocation in particular. And the written record of the result of those discussions shall accompany the statement of reasons. So that we are distilling a methodology, which I certainly, sir, and I have challenged the Deputy Chief Parliamentary Counsel on this matter. And if you know the Deputy Chief Parliamentary Counsel, sir, she is very keen not to be invited into the realm of the political. But I have challenged her, sir, to assist me in finding anywhere where we have gone that far in the law of Barbados in order to make sure that we have introduced a system of governance which in minute detail ensures that level of fairness and removes the arbitrary and discretionary ability on the part of the state in favor, sir, in favor of a leveling of the playing field between the state and the in this case, the vendor. Mr. Speaker, sir, I genuinely believe that we have pushed the frontiers in this regard further than they have ever been pushed before. I can't say that there's nowhere in the law of Barbados that has ever been done, but certainly I can't think of any, and I have not been shown any as yet. But, sir, I think that having read it to you, you understand what we are doing here. We are making sure, sir, that not only the vendor is consulted, but that we accept that the vendor, because he is really just an individual, in most cases not necessarily as robust or as competent in his own skin to be able to, or his own self, to be able to take on the weight of the state by himself. So that you bring in to assist the vendor organizations that represent the interests of vendors generally, like Barvin. So you can see easily, therefore, sir, that in a situation like this, you say you want to move in 30 days' notice. I have to write you and tell you that I'm inviting your views on the fact that I want to move you in 30 days. I get the view from you that you object to this, and you say why you object. I am not just going to just override you so. Barvin now must act almost like a trade union with that. And you come in and you say, well, listen, you want to move Miss Moore, but you can't just move Miss Moore so. These are the considerations. And that, Mr. Speaker, sir, is bringing a level of representation to the interests of the worker, which is entirely consistent with the platform of representation of labor in Barbados that we have evolved through time, about which we are so proud. And I think it is absolutely meet, fitting, and proper that it must now also be applicable to this business of vending, which has been, as I said, forged in a crucible of discrimination and unfair treatment. Now, Clause 18, sir, is equally important because it takes us to the point of grievance handling. How do we treat the disputes between vendors? And, sir, again, you know, real-life issues. I ain't gonna call the body name, but I know of circumstances where two people operating in the market together but cannot get on, cannot coexist. And so, therefore, there has to be a way of resolving that challenge in one small space. And we have built out in Clause 18, sir, a methodology for the treatment of the handling of disputes between vendors. And this, therefore, is one of the new grounds of appeal, which will be introduced on the amendment of this act, sir, so that the National Vending amendment of this bill, so that the National Vending Appeals Tribunal will have a jurisdiction with respect to dispute resolution between the parties once it is referred to them. As indicated, again, from the very practical reality of the witnesses that have come before us, sometimes these collisions of conflict can result in threats of violence, and sometimes even acts of violence. And so, therefore, what we are trying to do now is to have a functional dispute resolution system that makes the economic space within which the vendor work a lot more palatable. Clause 23, Mr. Speaker, sir, was also the subject of some discussion. And as I said, Clause 23 speaks to appeals generally. So the first thing that had to be done was to ensure that at Clause 23, the provision was made for the resolution of disputes, which I just related to. The second thing that was done, Mr. Speaker, sir, was to make sure that we had the resolution of the issue of relocation or eviction notices being able to be submitted to the Vending Appeal Tribunal, so that if there is, even after the interface with the representative of the vendor, an issue that is not resolved, then the Vending Appeal Tribunal can speak and treat to the issue in a final way with respect to relocation or eviction notices. Beyond that, sir, we have sought to ensure that the expectations at Section 5.2 and 5.4 in the Act for there to be the issuance of licenses within a certain time frame, in this case 7 days, is something that is done in a manner that holds the feet of the state to the fire. All too often, legislation prescribes that, well, this can happen. It is the business of the state, I think, to make sure that you don't just promise it can happen, but that it happens. The vendor's license is a passport for that person to earn a legitimate living in this land of his or her birth. And the fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, sir, that we can't have a circumstance where there is a non-communication between two departments of government for whatever reason, and so much time passes that I can't get my license. They're waiting for my license, and because there's some bungling that's taking place, I, as the entrepreneur, must suffer financially. I can't feed my family because government can't get its act together. The state should never do that to its citizen. We felt very strongly about that. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, so what we have done now is to have a requirement that within 7 days, that application for a license must be treated too. And it is even more important that we do that because we are doing this for the first time ever across 3 theaters of activity. You have the agriculture sector, You have the fish market sector. You have the wayside vendors and the public markets. And Mr. Speaker, sir, it is important to make sure that when an application comes to one central place, that the consultation between the different officials, is there space in the fish market? That's the only consultation that needs to be. I have an application here for Paynes Bay Fish Market in St. James. How much space is available there? Can that application be filled, yes or no? I don't need to know anything else. If you don't have it there, is there anywhere else that we can put this person? And Mr. Speaker, sir, we feel that that must be a communication that is over and done with in quick time. For that to sit on somebody's desk for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks means that there's a person in Barbados who is being deprived for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks of an opportunity to earn a living, feed his family, and get on with life, sir. And so therefore we have brought a screeching halt to that process and enshrined that into the legislation. And where it is breached, then it is a matter for the National Vending Appeals Tribunal to treat too. And in that regard, sir, to bring some degree of finality to the process and clarity of purpose to the process. Mr. Speaker, Clause 29, 30, 31, and 36 arguably are the most exciting parts of this bill. Clause 29, Mr. Speaker, sir, is the introduction of the administrative penalties. And I have said to you that we have replaced that ancient and oppressive system with a system that is now introducing administrative penalties in the form, sir, of a financial requirement instead of giving people criminal convictions. The Clause 29 treats to that. And at 29.4, we have introduced a hardship clause. And the reason for that hardship clause, and I say this openly, sir, again, when I presented this bill a couple of weeks ago in here, I was satisfied in my mind that we had done justice. I benefited, I believe members of the committee benefited, from hearing from vendors. Some of whom, sir, said very clearly, this is a business, and this business must be treated as any other business, and people must be required to pay their fees, they must be required to meet their obligations. We are not asking for any special favor or special treatment. Having said that, there were one or two other vendors who made the point. That is true. That which I just said is true. But there is an equal reality that it is a hard economy, and it is a hard struggle to be hustling out there and meeting all your bills. And while you may have a penalty to meet, sometimes the cash flow in there. Are you going to deprive me of my livelihood? It's something that we had to reflect on a little bit. And Mr. Speaker, sir, what we have done is to put in place the hardship clause at 29.4. So it says that notwithstanding where the manager of markets is satisfied, notwithstanding subsection 3, which is that you have to pay the administrative penalty. Where the manager of markets is satisfied on grounds of undue hardship or for any other reason that it would be just and equitable to do so, he may arrange with the person who is the subject of the penalty notice to pay the penalty set out in the notice in installments. And so therefore, sir, the penalty can be paid in installments over a period of time, thereby enabling the individual not to have the back broken by the requirement of the administrative penalty in situations of hardship, but at the same time in ensuring that the state treats to this business as a business like any other, in the words of Mr. Alexander, that must have its membership understand the importance of meeting their obligations and requirements in law. Mr. Speaker, sir, Clause 30 is equally important because it provides us with a procedure for challenging alleged contraventions of the administrative penalty notice. And therefore, people who wish to challenge the contravention as alleged may, instead of paying the amount of the penalty, apply to the tribunal, the appeals tribunal, in accordance with Section 23, so that this process can be quasi-judicially resolved. The administrative penalty, sir, is an amount of money which is constituting a debt to the state, no longer the Crown, to the state, and is recoverable, Mr. Speaker, in civil proceedings before a magistrate's court. And this piece of the bill, Clause 31, effectively, and I hope permanently, removes from the landscape of Barbados this matter of criminalization of people in any way, shape, or form in association with the business of vending. If you have incurred a penalty, that penalty is a debt due to the state. It is a debt which is recoverable in civil proceedings before a magistrate's court in Barbados, having absolutely nothing to do now with any involvement of the Royal Barbados Police Service as we go forward. And Mr. Speaker, sir, perhaps nearest and dearest to the hearts of all of us must be Clause 36, which says that notwithstanding the provisions of the Criminal Records Rehabilitation of Offenders Act, Cap 127A, the record of any sentence of a person convicted of an offense of selling or offering or exposing for sale of goods, wares, or merchandise in a public place, on a street, a lane, an alley, a road, a highway, a beach, or within the curtilage of that person, or any other similar document under any enactment, shall be deemed to be expunged with effect from the commencement of this act. And Mr. Speaker, sir, literally thousands of Barbadians will now have, some who have gone to their graves, will now have that record, that scourge removed, sir, from their record. And I feel a sense of indebtedness to the committee for holding the line and walking with us in this regard. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, perhaps I should share with you before I close what the penalties are. Frankly speaking, sir, all of the penalties now are $500. We have heard the arguments for and against, and we have settled, sir, on, clearly there was a point in time when I think one penalty was as high as $1,500. But we have now, sir, settled on $500 across the board, which we think is an eminently reasonable way of treating to these matters. I believe, sir, that it reflects a balanced approach to all of the submissions that had been made before us, and we are therefore going to proceed with that regard. Sir, many years ago, Nelson Mandela told the world that money does not create the success of a nation. Instead, he said, giving people the freedom and the environment within which to make money is the key to the nation's success. This particular bill, Mr. Speaker, sir, gives Barbadians that freedom and gives them that environment. The price, sir, of that freedom has been exceptionally high. It has been paid for, as I indicated to the House at the start of this speech, sir, it has been paid for through the centuries, from the 1688 Slave Code right through, Mr. Speaker, sir, to maybe 10, 15 years ago. We have had instances of that price being paid. Our people, sir, along the journey, some have paid for it with their blood. But whatever the price that was being paid, the one path that was never taken, Mr. Speaker, the one path that was never taken was the path of surrender. Our people, sir, have never chosen either surrender or submission. And today, sir, we do what I believe is the discharging of a moral duty to those forefathers of ours. A duty, sir, to discharge a moral obligation to them. And I ask, sir, for this House's unanimous support as we chart a new course in a new republic, set a new direction, Mr. Speaker, sir, for a better destiny for the people of Barbados whom we are privileged to represent. I am obliged to you. I beg, sir, to move that the resolution do pass.
Honourable Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it gives me great pleasure to participate in this debate this morning, recognizing that this is really the first formal work of this Parliament since the declaration of our nation becoming a parliamentary republic. And Mr. Speaker, I shan't be long, but the reality is that I can think of no better resolution to be before this House for all types of reasons. One, the substance of it is a matter that has been unresolved for too long in the affairs of this country. I was just looking for something in my iPad. I haven't quite found it. But it was a news story from the 1950s with my grandfather representing vendors and their right to be able to ply their trade without the harassment and the criminalization that they were facing. That it has taken this nation over 70 years, in spite of active political engagement on this topic, is regrettable. But that we are here at last is capable. That we need first and foremost to understand why these things are so appropriate for this morning. The notion that a person should become a criminal for simply trying to provide for their families can only be a legacy of the worst aspects of our colonial settlement. There are those who are concerned about order, and that is a legitimate concern. But this government has shown by the settlement of this piece of legislation that those concerns about order can be met in a manner that does not make a man or a woman a criminal in this country for simply wanting to support their families. Especially when the governments have not created the opportunities, either substantively or physically, for people to be able to ply their trades. Secondly, that this is appropriate here is because it is all that sought to fine and confine everyone, even for civil breaches. Mr. Speaker, you are well familiar with the criminal law. And it is the view of this government that the criminal law and its penalties should be reserved for criminal acts, not simply to penalize persons for breaches of civil aspects of our conduct. And we hope that this will be followed as we sent the signal through the Honourable Attorney General with many, many more pieces of legislation where civil and administrative penalties become the order of the day rather than simply fining and confining persons and allowing those persons to develop a criminal record. Tears came to my eyes, sir, when I read the provisions of Clause 36 of this bill. I can think of a lady who used to come in the Ministry of Education every Friday. She used to bring fruit for us. I was a young minister. The Honourable Member for St. Thomas will recall her well. One of the things that has hurt me most in public life was to see this woman being harassed and chased out of Swan Street a few years ago when we were in opposition for doing nothing more than trying to find some other people to sell her wares to, her fruit to, because the location from which she had been selling before was no longer available. And there obviously had not been the settlement of a license for her in a new location. Now, what would we have wanted Gertrude to do? Don't eat? Don't sleep? Get sick? Beg? A government needs to be responsive to the needs of its people in every manner possible, where possible. It's not always going to happen, and we're sanguine enough to know that that's just not how it works, largely because of the monolithic structure of government. But as far as possible, we must work hard each and every day to make it happen. When I spoke at Queen's Park on the eve of us becoming the government of this nation, I indicated that there were a number of things that I would like to see on the first order paper. The decriminalization of vending was one of them. We brought the others. We did the declaration of the assets. All ministers had to submit, and they're kept under the guardianship of the Cabinet Secretary. But we deliberately took a decision to pull this because we felt that as worthy as it is to decriminalize, as we are doing now, and you know the impact that it has had on me personally, because as I said, earlier tears came to my eyes. But we felt that the bill had to be much more than decriminalizing if we were going to do justice to the class of persons who have been the unsung heroes of this nation and who have taken on sun and rain, day in and day out, criminal penalties, uncertainty, to be able to provide for their families. And it is therefore against that backdrop that is the third reason that I'm happy that this is the first work of this Parliament after becoming a parliamentary republic. And what is that? That the recognition now of the worthiness of the profession to which vendors belong is captured not simply in the decriminalization of vending, but in the construction of a framework and a new deal, including the governance of how they shall operate in this land. Mr. Speaker, I am a proud Barbadian today to be able to be in this part, to lead a government that has recognized that centuries of discrimination, criminalization can be brought to an end with not simply the decriminalization of the act, not simply the expungement of the records of those who had to face the indignity of being carried before the law courts and then being literally made to feel as though they were criminals in their own land, but in the construction of a new deal, a new framework. And I want, therefore, to thank the Honourable Minister, because the fourth part of it, as to why I'm happy to be here, will come. But I want to thank the Honourable Minister, the member for St. James Central, for what clearly has been, along with his other parliamentary colleagues, significant work in bringing us to this point today, where we can settle and pass on to the upper house, for them to allow us to make this bill law, this body of work. I keep saying that yes, I'm a hard taskmaster, not because I want to be, but because I feel that we don't have the luxury of time in these difficult times, in the middle of an IMF program, in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of a climate crisis, in the middle of trying to preserve our nation from the vagaries of violence. We have a duty to build faster than any government has had to build. And yes, the opposition, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition in here, and your I don't know what to refer to him as, but to your senator, sorry. I almost said your consignee. But the truth is, I don't think that that would be fair to you. But the truth is this, that yes, this is a government in a hurry. And yes, sometimes milk will spill. But if we don't be a government in a hurry, we may not have a country to be in a hurry about. And I say so conscious of what I am seeing other countries go through in this region and elsewhere. There are countries that cannot pay salaries easily as we speak in this region. There are countries that are facing far, far, far more grim circumstances in terms of order than we have. And the reason why we are in a hurry is because we recognize that there are people equally who cannot bear the burden, cannot be sufferers for much longer. We're in a hurry to get more capital projects going so that we can continue to see the decline in unemployment that we've already seen, having reached a high last year of over 25%. We are hovering back down at around on or about 17%. I don't have the exact number to the top of my head. But we need to bring it further back down because we are not comfortable with it there. And I'm satisfied that with the arrangements that we are putting in place, whether legislative for self-employment and facilitating it, or whether public sector capital projects, private sector capital projects, so long as there is no unfortunate and unusual development in this pandemic or climatic event, I now have to add, we should continue to see the decline of unemployment, or to put it a different way, the creation of many, many more jobs over the course of the next few months. I see what is before me. I know what is about to come down. And therefore, I look forward to 2022 being that year where the worst of what Barbadians have had to suffer for the last 2 years can begin to be put behind us. Not going to happen overnight, but it will continue to happen in the right direction. The fourth reason why I'm happy to be here this morning relates to the deepening of our democracy. This government has made it a habit of going into select committee on a number of pieces of legislation. I'd like to do even more, but sometimes time is of the essence because of the very delicate balance that we are managing both nationally and internationally, Mr. Speaker. And yes, there will be times because we have the same few people doing everything. It's the same draftsmen that do the directives every 2 weeks. It's the same draftsmen, the handful of them, and I literally mean handful, who are dealing with each and every ministry. And while we are trying to amplify the resources, the reality is that drafting skills is a shortage. There's a shortage of drafting skills, not in Barbados alone, but across the entire Commonwealth, across the Caribbean, across the Commonwealth. And therefore, as much as we would like to be able to have more and to make provisions for more, there is a genuine shortage. It is ironic that there are perhaps more lawyers in Barbados that have a master's in drafting than almost any other master's in law, because that was one of the few offered at the University of the West Indies at Cave Hill. But having gotten it, the majority who got it did so, whoops, turn left, turn right, move out. And therefore, the country and the governance of the country continues to be constrained by a lack of adequate drafting skills. But with that even, we have seen progress. In spite of that, we have seen progress. And therefore, for us to have the benefit of the drafters working in select committee, hearing the evidence from those who have come to share their experiences, that, Mr. Speaker, is one of the best examples of how democracy must work. And I can't wait till we get back into where we belong in town, as I feel as though I am in a foreign land in this building, in order to ensure that we continue to engage on a daily basis in the center of town with all of our people. Because for me, the democracy is not just about the formal proceedings in here, but it is about the ability to go out in the back and walk through and walk about at lunchtime, and to be able to hear people giving you that feedback live and direct, in addition to some of the other things. You may say that you could get it on the call-in program. I fear not, because it's the same few voices on the program over and over, and while we welcome them, we feel that we need and have a responsibility to have a wider level of consultation. There's an aspect of our governance that I hope the select committees will not only be driven by bills that are before us, but that the standing committees, as happens with the Ministry of Finance now, because that's how we do our estimates. The estimates is really a standing committee of finance of the House. I hope that the other standing committees, particularly those on social policy, will start to function. And there's a reason why. There must be a clear determination of what is acceptable and what is not acceptable in our country as the standard of behavior within the governance of our country and the conduct of public affairs. And I believe that that should come not just in the form of the legislative standards, but also in the kinds of conversations that we have in this, our highest court of the land. And I pray, therefore, that this Parliament will establish a standing committee on social services, social policy, to also be ready to deal with what the Ministry of People Empowerment and Elder Affairs and a small subcommittee led by the Honourable Member for St. Michael South has been working on for the last 18 months. And Mr. Speaker, I know this is dear to your heart as a former social worker, which will be, and also the chairman of the National Assistance Board, the Honourable Member for St. Philip North. This will be the first attempt to restructure the delivery of social services and social policy in this nation in a meaningful and comprehensive way in many, many decades. The member for St. Michael East has been at the forefront in calling for what he calls a humanist face in the delivery of these services. I put it that way, but also add to it that for too long the delivery of services in this nation has been service-driven rather than people-centered. This country can no longer afford the luxury of service-driven social policy when it needs people-centered social policy. And why do I say so? Remember, for St. Michael Southeast is the Minister of Education and is now experiencing what I experienced for 7 years. You cannot solve the social and emotional learning problems of children in a vacuum. You can't. However much they come to school and spend 6 hours a day with you, or 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, they are more at home and in their community for a longer period of time. And therefore, any attempt to be able to solve the problems that undermine our fight against poverty will fail unless it is premised in the family and the community. And of that I am absolutely certain. The Honourable Member for St. Michael West, when we sought to elect a president, raised issues that I joined with him on a new deal for single mothers. And we've started that process because we believe that the establishment of a family court that does not discriminate between single parents and married parents is an absolute necessity in this country, in the same way that it was a necessity to abolish bastardy. This notion that if you don't have a ring on your finger, I got a ring on my finger, but it didn't for the marriage. So what is the significance of a ring on your finger driving you to the High Court? And without a ring on your finger, to get maintenance, you've got to go and stand up in the hot sun or the rain in the magistrate's court. It must stop in this nation. You want to know what a new republic means? These are the things that we are going after strongly and deliberately. And I hope, collectively, Honourable Leader of the Opposition. I know we can hold hands on this one. I'm not sure you may have a longer stride than me, but I don't think you're ahead of me. The bottom line is, look, we have enough battles to fight on things that we have no control over. And therefore, on the things that we have inherited that we can change, let us work together to change them. Because our people need it and deserve it. And therefore, the Standing Committee on Social Policy must start to work in this Parliament. And I expect it to report back to this Parliament on a new deal for single mothers within 4 months. I expect it to also settle and to have a say over the restructured delivery of social services when that paper comes to them, because that is the only way we are going to cause this country to evolve. And the third major piece of work will be that which will be brought by the Honourable Minister of Education, the reform of the Common Entrance Programme. I spoke in here today about moving away from the Victorian approach to criminal justice. But the same Victorian approach to criminal justice led to the reform of education in the 1940s that settled that we would take care of the top 40% and the other 60% only needed to be controllable through the church and through education. Controllable. That's the model we inherited. And that's why last night, there's a lot of emotion for me. And this week, Mr. Speaker, I met the Vice President of the Guild of Students, undergraduate students at UWI Caveville last night. And he delivered to me a letter to ask us why we do these things. These are the things that make all the difference in the world. Because on behalf of those persons who literally were the first persons to benefit from this government removing the payment of fees at UWI in 2018. Mr. Terrell Giles, Vice President and ICC Chairperson, the Guild of Students, UWI Cave Hill, and I'd like to make it a document of the House. And I want to read it very quickly if I can pray upon this House's time and patience. Dear Prime Minister Motley, I write today to express my absolute gratitude towards you and your government. Many of us well recall when the University of the West Indies programs costed Barbadian students roughly $18,000 and beyond to pursue an undergraduate degree. For a poor boy growing up in Allenview, St. Thomas, the thought of attending university was merely but a dream. One reason for not entertaining the thought of university was the fact that money would have to be borrowed to support the idea. Added to that, it always seemed as though a person had to be cut from a particular type of cloth to attend university and be successful. Indeed, myself and many others were not in a position to borrow anything to support this thought of university, and neither were our parents. Nevertheless, these factors did not stop me from applying to pursue a bachelor's in social work, ironically, social work. Special, with no idea of who was going to fund this degree. I'll go as far as to admit that I wasn't the best student academically, so at that point in time, it truly wasn't here nor there for me. What kept me going and invested, though, was hearing my grandmother brag about my mere university application as though I was a full graduate. It was through her and other key family members that I kept the hope of being accepted to university. Ironically, throughout your 2018 campaign, you mentioned that one of your mandates was that of covering the tuition costs for all Barbadian students at the University of the West Indies. Like any other young person, I assumed it was all talk and empty promises, coming from yet another politician. As the months of May and June went on, my anxiety, along with many other aspiring university students and their parents, started to increase. Even though your party had won the election, we were still receiving emails from the university outlining the fees, which included the said $18,000. When we challenged, or rather queried it, the university said they received no official communique from government as yet. So as it stands, the onus is on us to cover our costs. The miracle occurred when I received my acceptance letter and correspondence that the government communicated with the University of the West Indies regarding their covering of tuition costs in the same week. Madam Prime Minister, this gesture was indeed one which changed the lives of many young persons in Barbados. This bold step by yourself and your government has paved the way for young professionals to take their academics and professional aspirations to the next level. Additionally, I'm sure that there are many proud grandmothers like mine whose hearts are warm, along with many parents and caretakers that contributed to the upbringing of a UWI student in this era. We've witnessed the COVID-19 pandemic and the toll it took on Barbados and its finances, yet you still did not take free education from us. Likewise, we witnessed the freak storm, the ashfall, and the passing of the recent hurricane. Yet you still made it clear that this free education would not be taken from us. During our stay at Cave Hill, we've been through the rigorous methods of assessment. Though it seemed at some points as though lecturers were picking on us, we soon realized that in most cases they were pushing us to do our best. It is because of the caring staff at Cave Hill that we, the graduates, are now an addition to the critical thinkers in this society. We are now citizens who know when to agree, when to challenge a decision, and when to let things go. Apart from that, some of us, like myself, decided to get involved in the rich guild politics while at the campus. I served as the Faculty of Social Sciences representative for 1 year, and now I serve as Vice President of the Guild as I'm pursuing my master's degree. Through the many extracurricular activities, many of us were able to meet and bond with our regional brothers and sisters. Most of us can now say, for the first time, that we have friends in multiple Caribbean islands. In a few cases, some of us have made a bond even more special than friendship and have found our significant other from another Caribbean island. The graduating class of 2021 is the first group to have benefited from your kind gesture because we started in 2018. It would have been discourteous of us graduates, the first cohort of this grant, not to publicly thank you and your government for what you have done for us. All you have asked in return is for us to do give back hours, which we have been cooperating with you on. These give back hours have been beneficial in helping most of us put what we've learned in the classroom into practice in the community. For example, many of my social work skills and techniques, I was able to put them to use while volunteering at homes for elderly persons, at-risk youth, and even battered females. Madam Prime Minister, to you and the government of Barbados, we, the graduating class of 2021, by extension, all Barbadian university students and aspiring students, we thank you very much for this grant. Yours truly, Terrell Giles, BSc. Mr. Speaker, this is why we have come to public life. This is why we have come to public life. To be able to give opportunities to the children of vendors and all other kinds of people in this country, police, nurses, soldiers, teachers. But we've also come to public life to create the living and the livelihoods for persons who have not been seen for so long in the nation. And that's why at Golden Square Freedom Park, on the 2 occasions that I've now spoken there formally, I've asked people to do one thing. That when you come to this place, see people, hear people, and care about people. Because if we don't see each other, and we don't hear each other, and we don't care about each other, we are not going to be able to build the kind of nation that can provide for all of us in a sustainable way. And I therefore, Mr. Speaker, I could not be anywhere else today. I just came from a press conference launching a project that we hope to be one of the most significant projects in our post-independent history. For the last 41 years, work has been taking place at Newton Slave Burial Ground, extracting from the earth the bones and other artifacts, having the conversations to get the scholarly research going. And this government recognized 2 things, and I really want to pay tribute to the Pan-African community, to the Barbados Museum of Historical Society, and for all those who labored almost on the fringes of this nation. My own uncle, Elombe Motley, who is not here, for whom I really feel that he pays the price of being my uncle in a partisan small society. And we determined as a government, and the member for St. Philip West is not here because I left him dealing with the matters. I want to pay tribute to him as Minister of Culture for helping to bring things to the point where, as Minister of Finance and Prime Minister, I could say, let us go. The Reclaiming Our Atlantic Destiny project is linked to what we've been doing with Africa. It is a recognition that we have a duty, first and foremost, to tell the stories, as Senator Reverend Rogers said so eloquently in the Independence Service sermon last Sunday, to tell our stories, first and foremost for ourselves, but equally for the world. For this is the nation that brought itself into ignominy with the passage of that 1661 slave code, and for the work that is still being done by the historians on the genocide of the Amerindians that took place prior to the British arriving and claiming this nation as theirs. Mr. Speaker, that project, for which there will be a global press release this afternoon as well, seeks to commemorate the lives that were lost there, of persons who did not know liberty at the time of their death, of persons who had to endure the worst that human beings could put on another human being, the greatest crime, in my view, against humanity. We have a responsibility to tell the story of those persons, even if centuries later. And what is significant is that that burial ground goes back, I believe, to the 17th century. It is one of the few places in the world where the records are as complete as they are. And when we add to that Barbados has the largest transatlantic slave records in the world outside of the United Kingdom, then you begin to understand that this is not only a moral imperative, but an economic necessity if we are to build out new opportunities for our citizens and to build out a heritage economy and a heritage district specifically at Newton. That will be one of what we hope to be ultimately 4 projects that will come to define the start of the parliamentary republic at that level within the context of our national consciousness and our contribution to engage in the world. The other 3 projects, one relates, we hope, to working with the University of the West Indies and other interested bodies to create a school of public policy for small island developing states that allows the world to understand what our reality is. Half the time while we have these one-size-fits-all prescriptions from 9/11, Resolution 1393, or the ones being foisted on us by the OECD or the Financial Action Task Force, or even the way in which those responsible for climate have been dealing with us, is because they do not understand the reality of small island developing states. And they therefore foist on us one-size-fits-all prescriptions that do nothing but destroy us. I maintain that one of the reasons why the Caribbean is one among the most heavily indebted regions in the world has to do with the fact, Mr. Speaker, that when the WTO was formed, member for St. James Central knows it well too because he was at the center of it in the last administration when we were government. The removal of non-tariff barriers from our arsenal of policy instruments dealt a serious blow and has led to us being unable to protect our farmers and our manufacturers, such that we saw a decimation of agricultural production in this country, and on top of that, a decimation of manufacturing. We don't have a garment industry as we used to have. In fact, we're now trying to rebuild one. Fashioned in a different way, of course, because value added must now count, because we can't compete on the basis of price alone. We have to compete on the basis of quality. We have to leverage West Indies Sea Island cotton. We have to be able to leverage the creativity of our designers in order to be able to have an industry that can hold its own. And that is why I said, even as we help them with the purchase of the school uniforms, as we want to, that it has also to be a commitment on their part to lift their game and to move to the next level so that we are building out new industries that are appropriate to the times in which we live. Mr. Speaker, that school of public policy for small island developing states is critical if we are going to sensitize people to the realities of our condition. All of these treaties that we sign globally, more often than not, impose obligations, administrative, human, and financial obligations, not easily undertaken. And that's why the whole discussion on how the world finances global public goods is so absolutely critical. That's why you see me having to spend so much time, regrettably, outside, because if we don't get it right, the policy instruments that we come into this parliament and can use will be virtually none. Virtually none. So that we have to be fighting a constant battle, educating people as to what our reality is. Well, let's create an institute that can do it as a matter of scholarly effort and that can share it on an ongoing basis. The third component, and we started the conversations with the Trust of the Codrington College, is the establishment of a spiritual university as a network of other spiritual universities across the world. And we're not talking simply about the Abrahamic faiths, we're talking about those religions out of Africa and Asia and Latin America, from the indigenous populations as well. And why? Because we believe that on this small island, we have had a tradition of spirituality, found and represented in different ways, not always leading, as we heard from Senator Rogers, to the most appropriate behavior. The notion of branding a man on his chest as a slave cannot be anything, there cannot be anything godly about that. But like civilization and human beings, we evolve. And the reality that this country has the oldest synagogue in the Americas, on this 166 square miles here, in our capital city, and that at Codrington, we have the oldest theological seminary in the Caribbean, if not among the oldest in the Americas, creates a moral legitimacy in addition to our aspirations to be able to say to a world where religion is becoming, regrettably, in parts of the world, the basis for people fighting in ways that we hope that they would not and should never. And we feel, therefore, that we have a responsibility to create a space and a place here where people can come together and to determine how globally people from different faiths and religions can live on this earth in peace. And if we can do that with other regions in the world, the Middle East, Africa, Asia, Latin America, then we believe that Barbados will continue to pay back to the world, especially given that we have given to the world those things of which we were not proud, like the Slave Code of 1661. And finally, Mr. Speaker, the creation of a film industry and sound stages so that we can practically tell our stories, whether it is through film, whether it is through software applications, whether it is through video games, or whatever form of digital expression that the world continues to develop. And that is why even the digitization of our archives for the project at Newton, the establishment of the Genealogy Research Center, and the museum that will tell the story of the transatlantic slavery era, as well as that of forced migration. Because we didn't only have to endure the perils of transatlantic slavery, but because of the lack of opportunities given to our people on this land because of the horrors that vendors and agricultural workers had to continue to face, because of the lack of housing and the awful public health conditions of which the Moyne Commission spoke, our people found it possible, or found it necessary, to leave this land and to look elsewhere to support their families. When I did the first emancipation lecture of this nation at the Barbados Museum and Historical Society, almost more than 20 years ago, I did research in our own Hansard, and I invite Mr. Speaker, you and others to pull the debates. Look at the debates post-emancipation. Look at the fact that in 1850, this Parliament, 1850 or 1851, this Parliament debated how it could stop Bajans going to Guyana, because they were the labor force that were going, they were no longer slaves, but because of the Master and Servant Act and the located labor legislation, if they wanted to live on the plantation, they had to sell the labor for almost another 100 years to the owner of the plantation. Forced labor. So that forced them into what? Migration. And therefore those stories must be told. We know only too well that we sent people to Panama, that Barbados had the largest amount of persons going into Panama. There are so many stories of the money that came back from Panama. And mercifully, our government took a decision to establish embassies from where we came, in Ghana, and ultimately the Rift Valley, where civilization started, in Kenya, to where we went, in Panama. And we've done it as part of a deliberate strategy. And people are beginning now to see the fullness of why we've done these things. But we also went to Costa Rica. We also went to Venezuela. We also went to Brazil. I tell the story of Al Jukes' father, who worked in the presidential palace in Venezuela. We went to Cuba. But what is perhaps less known is that we went back to Africa too. We went to Liberia. Let the records of this house carry forever the knowledge that the first person to be born in Barbados to assume the office of presidency is not Dame Sandra Mason, but is in fact the president of Liberia, Mr. Barkley, who was born here and went there as a teenager. And yet, my government, in coming to grips with all that we're doing, discovered this year that we don't even have, we did not, because we know, have diplomatic relations with Liberia for 55 years as an independent nation. But then again, this was the same country that 30 years ago wanted to assassinate my uncle for having emancipation lectures. We have to understand the evolution of this nation, and all of these are the growing pains. And I therefore say to us, Mr. Speaker, that what we are engaged in here today is another example of us defying those growing pains and rising above it all to forge this nation in a way that the children of independence must do. We didn't start it. We are the beneficiaries of the work and the sacrifice of those who went before. And were we to come into this chamber and not recognize that we have a moral duty to those children who are now graduating from UWI, or a moral duty to those who live in this land wanting to provide for their children, but had to do so at the peril of being called criminals and disruptors, and to have to run from pillar to post to avoid a stay in the police station, the loss of their property in some instances, because when the police hold you, sometimes you don't get to gather up all that you got, so you've taken the loss twice. If the children of independence did not come in here and do the things that we are doing, then we would have to ask the Right Excellent Errol Walton Barrett and the Right Excellent Sir Grantley Herbert Adams, what did they really do? But because we know what they did, and because we are the beneficiaries of their journey, conscious that while their vision went far, their bodies and their work could carry them only so far, we have taken up through successive generations the mantle of leadership that started with the revolutionary spirit from as far back as the 17th century. Each century, each generation, moving it further, moving it further. And we are not so arrogant as to believe that it can be done in the lifetime of us. There will be people probably still telling the children in 30 years' time, although I hope not, that the hair too hard, or that the nose too broad, or that they should stay out the sun so they don't get too dark. I would like to think that with every decade, we will win that battle. But, Mr. Speaker, I've been around long enough to know that these great battles take centuries sometimes. Because what you are doing is trying to deconstruct a mental landscape that was toxic, but that was also salacious and satisfying, so that you're lured away with the things that appear to give you pleasure, appear to give you happiness, but deep down undermine your ability to move forward in the strongest and sensible way. You know, the last two sermons in our independent service, I'd like to ask to be printed and made documents of this Honourable House, because I believe that the sermons of both Mr. Suleiman Bulbulya and Senator Reverend Rogers ought to become part of the records of anyone who comes into Parliament, to be able to understand what was happening in this country at the time that we made these decisions as a Parliament. And that, along with the things that we are doing substantively like this, I hope will come to be appreciated, that this journey is both about body and soul, and that this journey is necessary for us to make the next level, which is to secure our nation on a sustainable basis and to ensure that we can truly produce those global citizens with Bajan roots. For all of the battles that we are fighting internationally, they cannot be won by nations singularly. They have to be won through global cooperation. And Barbados understands, as I said, that we must not only be one of the best small island developing states in the world, but we must be one of the best small island developing states for the world. Because the world, more than ever, needs voices that anchor the nations and the people of the world to doing the right thing as we face some of the worst crises that human civilization has had to deal with. That we can overcome them, I am absolutely confident. But that we must work each and every day to overcome them, I am committed, and my government and the members of this party are more than committed. I want to thank the Honourable Minister, the member for St. James Central. This volume of work does not happen by somebody wishing it to happen. I want to thank the former minister as well, the Honourable Member for St. George South, who started the work. And I want to thank formally now the other members of the committee, the Honourable Member for St. Michael West Central, the Honourable Member for Christchurch West Central, the Honourable Member for St. Philip South, the Honourable Member for St. Michael South, the Honourable Member for St. Michael East, the Honourable Member for St. George North, and in particular for continuing to represent the voice of Labour in this, the 80th year of the anniversary of the Barbados Workers' Union, especially so for me as the first female General Secretary. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition and Member for St. Michael West, the Honourable Senators, with your permission, sir, Senator Lisa Cummins, Senator Dr. Lynette Holder, Senator Damian Sands, Senator Caswell Franklin, Senator Julian Hunt, and Senator Althea Wiggins. And above all else, I want to thank Barvin, the Wayside Vendors Association, Ambassador, and with your permission to Ambassador David Comijon, Barnufo, and I wish that Angela Watson was here today to be with us, for she, more than many others, would have celebrated today like no other. Mr. Speaker, we didn't get here by dropping out of the sky. The lesson for our people and our young people in particular is that great battles are not often won overnight or in a year or two. They take decades sometimes centuries. But we must never stop believing in them if they are worthy and principled. That they are difficult, the fact that they're great means that battle will be difficult and complex. But in particular, those last organizations that I call and individuals, I know you have done it in the face of all adversity, public condemnation sometimes, harassment sometimes. But we could not be standing here today if you didn't make that stand and hold that position. There will be many times when I will disagree and people will disagree with me. But we must always be able to find the common purpose and the common mission if this nation is to go forward. Mr. Speaker, I thank you for allowing me to speak a little broader than the resolution might otherwise have initially and reflected. But I believe that the moment, the time, the day, the occasion from which I just came, and the week makes this kind of engagement necessary and soothing. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, for your patience, for allowing me to share these few words on this most momentous of occasions in the annals of our history. I'm obliged to you.
Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I therefore beg to move the suspension of the sitting until 2:25 p.m.
Questions that this honourable chamber be suspended until 2:25 p.m. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honourable chamber stands suspended until 2:25 p.m.